Hello everyone, this is Just a Dad. Today I'm going to do a detailed review on this Verismo machine from Starbucks. Now originally I think these machines were made by Kefee, but I think Starbucks started making them. But it seems to be like a Starbucks line. But there is a Kefee website, but it kind of links you to the Starbucks website. But this is a little bit older machine. I was able to find this machine on Facebook Marketplace. These machines are going for about $60, and it seems to be in good working order. So before we begin, it's got this big lever here, and that's where the pods go. Now, I was kind of new to the whole pod thing, and originally I kind of thought this was a K cup, kind of a Keurig thing, but it's not. These cups are specific to the Verismo system, and that's what they look like. You got to peel off this bottom, and so here's some other cups you've got. This is an espresso vertical line. This is an espresso original line, and this is a Keurig K cup. So these are quite a bit bigger. They're not going to come anywhere close to fitting in there. But originally, so the Nespresso line was kind of confusing to me. I did a video on this vertical line. This is the newer one that takes these, and then I've got the older, the original line. But back to these are Verismo pods. It has to be a specific Verismo pod. Now Starbucks sells a bunch of these, but there are other manufacturers that sell these pods. But it has to say the Verismo system on it. Otherwise it's not going to work. And the next thing is you've got two different types of pods. You've got an espresso pod and a brewed pod. Now a brewed is what they call like a coffee. And so on this machine, that's your espresso button. That's your coffee button. This is your coffee button, but it's brewed at a lower temperature. They call it the milk button. So when you want to brew your coffee over milk, you're going to press that. That's a rinse button. And that's hot water. So pretty standard. So this machine will let you do a cup of coffee and an espresso shot, which is really nice. And that's why they sell this frother. So this is the milk frother from the Verismo. This is a really nice milk frother. It just doesn't do a whole bunch of milk. But for a latte, this works really well. And there's just really one setting. You turn it on, it heats it up and froths it. And it's really foamy. So we'll use that for our lattes. So I'm going to start off by doing espresso shots and then a coffee. And we'll play around with hot water. But this is a pretty, let's do dimensions on the machine. So front to back, you've got about 14 inches. Side to side about 6.5. And it's only about 11 inches tall, but you need about 16 inches, maybe about 16 inches for the lever. So the machine reminds you of a Keurig machine. It's got a water reservoir. It's a pretty nice water reservoir. There's no lid per se, but you can take this over there. It's got that nice handle. You can fill it up. Now mine doesn't have a carbon water filter, but you might have a carbon water filter that sits over that that entrance there for the water to go into the machine. So the water's got a tank inside here. It's going to suck the water down. It's going to heat the water up, send it through the pod, and then it's going to come out. Pretty simple system. This system seems a little noisy to me. A little more noisier than normal, but the Nespresso line's pretty noisy, but Keurig machines aren't this noisy. But it's got this really gnarly thing that's going to pierce the pods down there as you move it. That's how you get your friction, your levers, how you kind of get your lever action. It's got a power button on the top. The thing shuts itself off after I think about 30 minutes. So when you first turn it on, the lights are going to flash. Now they're not flashing in real life. They're on steady. But they do flash when it has to heat the water up. And then when they're all steady like it is now, it's ready to brew. And it didn't take very long. So when I first put water in it and first turned it on, this thing does heat up really quick. So in the morning when you come out here and turn it on for the first time, within a couple minutes you're going to have whatever you need brewed, ready to go. So it is a 3-prong cord. It's about a 2-foot cord. Again, these machines look really nice. You know, they're very basic from the front. There's not a lot of wording. There's just pictures on the buttons. So again, we'll turn it on, and these lights are flashing. But as soon as the water gets up to temperature, they'll turn steady. And that's the water inside here. There's a tank that's got to get up to temperature. So now it's up to temperature, and all these lights are on steady. So this thing's got a tray, and this is a removable drip tray. But then you can also just put this grate on here, so you can put taller cups in. Now this thing has, okay, so it's stored when you're done with the pod goes inside the machine, and you got to pull this whole tray out. I've seen this on other machines. I've seen this on the Nespresso machine has this, but you're going to pull this out, and here's where the pods are going to go. So after that pod gets pierced and brewed, when you lift the handle, it just drops down into this. Well, I'll show you that later. And the machine does, some water does collect in here. I've noticed that with some other brewers. I think that's pretty common. When there's water that just kind of comes, when this pot is up there brewing, I think there's a little bit of water that just comes around it, and this catches it. So you do have to empty this, and there will be water in this every time. And same down there in that drip tray. But it just fits in there like that. This is your drip tray. And then it just slides in. You got this great big cavity. And again, so it's kind of hidden, because you look at it going, you don't realize that comes out. And you got to kind of pull on it a little bit. But that's where it goes. This, if you're not using this, you just got to kind of store it off to the side. I do recommend using this when you're brewing a smaller shot or whatever, because if you can use this, because this thing I noticed does splatter a little bit. Okay, so again, let's talk pods. You've got brewed. Now this is for a coffee. And then you've got an espresso. This is for like a latte or cappuccino. And again, so that's the espresso button, kind of like a small espresso cup. That's the coffee button. They call it the brewed button, but I like to call it the coffee button, because that's going to make you an 8-ounce cup of coffee. The espresso runs it says it runs 1 ounce through, but it normally does about 1.5 ounces through. So it's a really small concentrated. And these pods, now they look identical. So here we have the espresso, and here we have the coffee pod, I call it. But you can feel they're different weights, and that's because this one has less coffee grounds in it than this. Okay, so here I cut open the pods. Here is the brewed coffee pod, and here's the espresso coffee pod. Now I measured it. Surprisingly enough, the coffee pod has 2 tablespoons of coffee in it. It didn't seem like it could hold that much, but it actually does. And the espresso pod has about a tablespoon and a half. So quite a bit noticeably different. And it's also got this extra piece was on top. So you've got, so inside the pod, so you don't have the thing you peel away on this one. I just noticed that. Then on this one, you've got this you got to remember to peel away. Remove. So I'm not sure, but these pods are identical the same. But you do have a paper filter down there, and that's good. That's going to prevent sediment. The paper filter looks a little different over here on the espresso pod, but again, you'll have the grounds inside here, and then this sits on top. So we'll cut one of these open after we do a brew. But I did want to show you that you do get more coffee. Even though the pods are identical size, you get more coffee in the brewed coffee. So let's brew an espresso shot. So I'm going to grab the espresso pod. There it says espresso. I've got the machine on. All the lights are on steady. I'm going to lift the handle. It's got a cutout, so you couldn't put it the other way if you tried. It does have a little micro switch, so you got to make sure the handle is down. So you just put the pod in, It sits there, and then as you close the handle, oops, I wasn't fast enough. So it dropped down. It dropped down in here, so you got to be kind of quick. So that's the first time that's happened to me. So let's put the pod in. So when you're quick about it, it doesn't drop down. But if you kind of dilly-dally, it will drop down into that chamber. Okay, so all my lights are on steady. I'm just going to press the espresso button. So again, not much. You know, some people might come up here and hit that button again. You don't even have to lift the handle. This isn't like a Keurig where it kind of sees when the handle's been lifted or not. So you can just hit this button and do a double shot through that same pod. Because that is not, that's about an ounce, ounce and a half of coffee. Now I can program these to put out a little bit more. I'm going to show you that a little bit later in the video. But so there's your espresso shot. And these things, it does tend to drip for a while. So when we're done with the pod, when I lift this handle, you see how it just falls down in there. So now your pod, that's the used pod. And so it pierced the bottom and it pierced the top. So we'll set this aside. We're going to cut this open. Okay, so now we're going to do our coffee. Get your coffee cup down there. Again, I've got it's called the brewed. The brewed. I put it in, you just, and then just, yeah, don't mess around. When you want to close this, just close it. So now we got to hit the brewed button, which is the 8-ounce coffee, or about 7.1 they say. But so it does brew right away. Now this does brew a little bit different than a Keurig. A Keurig, I think, is a little bit more, you don't get kind of this foamy action. Because the coffee does have a little bit of a foam on top, coffee foam. Temperature. That's a pretty hot cup of coffee. And the espresso, it's cooled off, but it comes out around 165. It's already cooled off, but it comes out around 165. So that's a really hot cup of coffee, but it's got a little, so this is a little different than a Keurig machine. It's kind of more along the lines of an espresso machine. The espresso machines, you get the kind of the frothy coffee at the top, but this tastes really good. It's got a good smell to it. Yeah, that's kind of the Starbucks signature taste you get. And it just tastes, it's a really good cup of coffee. Okay, so I'm done with the coffee. I'm going to lift the handle. And there goes the coffee pot. Okay, so up first we've got the espresso pod. So it did poke a hole in the bottom. You can hardly see it, but it does poke some holes in the top. Here we have the coffee. So, oh geez, I forgot to remove the... I can see how that would be easy to do, darn it. I forgot to remove this. That's gonna take some getting used to. But even if you forget to remove it, well, what would happen is you would want more coffee to come out around the opening. Here's one that I did earlier, and see how you get more coffee coming out around the filter. So I'm gonna cut them open and we'll see. Okay, so here I cut that's just a really thin piece of plastic. There you've got, this is the coffee on the right, and this is the espresso one that I was telling you about that had that extra piece. So let's pull it out. It doesn't get pierced, but the water must go around it somehow. And there you've got the coffee grounds. So it does a pretty good job of getting them all saturated. That's good. Yeah, they're all nice and wet. And then here's the coffee. So yeah, it does a good job with it too. Okay, so I was curious about this piece that was on top of the espresso pod. It didn't look like it had any holes, but it's got little holes in it. So that's how the water is shot from the top. When it pierces that plastic, then it comes through these little holes. That makes a lot more sense now. So you can do espresso shots through coffee pods. You know, and it might even be a little more concentrated. The machine doesn't know what pod you put in. Unlike the Nespresso Verdio line, it knows exactly what pod you put in, and it will only run that espresso shot. So you could definitely run espresso shots through the coffee pods. Okay, so some of the other features of this. Now, when it has a rinse button. See how that looks like a shower head? That's a rinse button. So when I press this, I don't need I've got my pod out. So see, there's no pod in here. And every once in a while, it's a good idea to rinse this with no pod. So I'm gonna leave that open, close the handle, and I'm just gonna do a rinse. The rinse is 1.5 ounces of just hot water through the machine to kind of rinse it out. See, it's kind of a quick rinse. You definitely want to do that because it has a feature here where if you want just hot water. So say you wanted some hot chocolate and somebody just brewed a cup of coffee, you would want to do a rinse first before you wanted your water, because you're going to get some kind of like some brown coffee and it'll look kind of like brown in it. Okay, so the other button here is hot water. So when I press this button, it's going to give me 5 ounces of hot water. And that hot water is going to be about 5 to 10 degrees hotter than a cup of coffee. So if you had a tea bag or a hot chocolate, it's pretty hot. You know, you're at 170, 180, almost 175, I'm sorry, 180. So that's a really hot cup of coffee, or a really hot cup of water. And again, it's 5 ounces. But I'm going to do another video where I'm going to show you how you can program the water level. So if you want more to come out of here when you press this button, I'm going to do another video to show you that. And same with the coffee and the espresso. If you want that water level to be a little higher, I'm going to show you how to program those buttons. So once I did a rinse, so now this water looks pretty clear. That would be good for like a soup or a tea. Okay, so the one last button on here, this is a little confusing to me. They call this the milk button, but it brews a coffee. So you have to use the brewed or the coffee pods. And when we press this button, it's going to do 7, almost 8 ounces into milk, but it's only about 10 degrees cooler. So I found that it's brewing it around 150, where a cup of coffee is around 165. So it's really going to melt that ice. Now, I've got ice and milk in here. You may just have milk in here. But, so let's try this. Let's put our coffee in. Got it closed. And then I'm just going to hit this milk button. So there you go. It put about the size of a oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. So when you do the milk button, it does 4.6 so almost 5 ounces through a coffee cup. I'm sorry. So not this much, not 8 ounces, but 5 ounces into a milk, and you can put ice in it. But the milk, you know, you can stir it up. You can see the ice does melt pretty quick because that is brewed pretty hot. But normally an iced coffee is usually around 35, 40 degrees. So I could have added a little more ice, but then you start running into getting it pretty watered down. But it does give you that option. So again, this is almost 2 ounces, like 1.5, 1 to 1.5. This is 7.1, but I noticed it's about 8 ounces. And then this is only 4.6, about 5 ounces. And so this tastes really good, you know. Since it's only running 5 ounces through that coffee, the theory is they run a little bit less water through that pod to give you more concentrated, but they know the ice or the milk is kind of going to dilute that coffee, so they want that coffee to be a little more concentrated. I'm going to do some other videos. So we've got these espresso shots, so the possibilities are endless with those. And with this frother, I'm going to do another video on using the frother, making some lattes and cappuccinos. This video mainly just, I want to go in detail on the machine, the buttons, kind of the capabilities, and so I'll do other videos with different types of drinks I'm going to make with this. So my next video I'm going to do is I'm going to program these buttons. I can make this brew a little bit less or more coffee. I'm also going to do a descaling video. I'm going to show you how to descale this, which you really should keep up on descaling. I've got another video where I took a coffee maker apart that hadn't been descaled, and it looks absolutely disgusting on the inside. So we really want to keep up on descaling. Otherwise, I mean, these machines are kind of expensive, and if you don't keep up on the descaling, they're going to fail on you pretty quick. So I'll do another video on descaling. And again, I'm going to do several videos on different types of drinks. So I hope this video helped. Leave your comments down below. I check my comments on a daily basis. If you got any questions about this machine, it seems like a pretty versatile machine. It's just understanding the different pods. It was so confusing to me. And so I thought, you know, there's got to be other people in the same boat. And so I thought I would do some videos and explain these different type of pods. Because once you get to know them, it is relatively simple. But boy, it's kind of a learning curve there at first. So again, I hope the video helps. If you could, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.